Now, as I said, through Friday, we've got wet and windy weather arriving into the northwest. So first thing on Friday across western areas of Scotland, the Highlands and Western Isles, probably some outbreaks of quite heavy rain. Further east to this, it will be a bright start across parts of Aberdeenshire, also across the Borders region as well, plenty of dry and bright weather. Further south as well, a fairly bright start to the day, particularly across Wales, central areas of England, the southwest as well. But in the southeast, there is a chance of some further heavy downpours through Friday morning. These bring a risk of further thunderstorms as well. Away from that, though, it should be another dry and bright day for many of us. Still feeling very warm in the sunshine across many areas of the UK. But across the north and west, where this wet and windy weather is spreading into parts of Northern Ireland and much of Scotland through Friday afternoon, it will turn a little bit fresher, temperatures dropping down into the teens away from the rest of the UK. Temperatures elsewhere still in the mid to high 20s and still feeling quite humid through Friday daytime. Into Friday evening, this band of rain will continue to push southeastwards through this evening to bring outbreaks of rain to many areas through Saturday, particularly in the southeast. That will clear away to the east for Sunday, but there's further rain arriving into the west later on. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, my name is Johnny Ratner. In West Yorkshire at Wetherby, the A168 remains closed. Investigation work is still taking place following an accident that happened this morning. In Greater Manchester, the M60 has been closed in both directions now, between the Portwood roundabout and the Stockport Pyramid exit for a police investigation. And a police investigation in the West Midlands has closed the northbound carriageway of the M5 from West Bromwich up to the M6 interchange. And in Lincolnshire, north of Grantham, the A1 remains closed northbound from Gollaby Moor up to Long Bennington following a serious accident. In Hampshire, the M271 is partly blocked northbound just south of the M27 heading out of Southampton following a crash causing queues back onto the A33. In Devon, north of Tiverton, the A396 is shut near the Bampton turnoff following a multi-vehicle crash. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
You really could become the next big Great British Giveaway winner with your chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. Listen to what some of our previous winners have to say about winning big with us.
On the day that I got the money in the bank account, everything just seemed a lot sunnier.
But I do have something to spend it on.
Just go for it. It's an absolute must.
Thank you, GB News.
Amazing feeling to win.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. We're all familiar by now with the fact that many people are taking to the streets of Britain. Our country feels a little bit like a tinderbox at the moment. Well, our Prime Minister has addressed the nation today, and I'm going to ask you, do you think he's made things better? Has he understood what's going on? Your thoughts on his speech? There is a lot to cover tonight, but first, let's get the 6 o'clock news headlines.
Michelle, thank you and good evening to you. Well, there's been a prisoner swap, the biggest since the Cold War. Evan Gershkovich is on his way home after that swap between Russia and the West. Today's internationally brokered deal involved around 24 prisoners in total, including the British-Russian citizen Vladimir Karamurza. In return, at least 8 Russian nationals are expected to be returned to Russia, including several with suspected ties to Russian intelligence. Speaking a short while ago, President Joe Biden thanked all the countries that had made it happen. Well, Sir Keir Starmer says those who took part in riots across several cities this week were not protesting. Instead, he said they were guilty of violent crimes. The scenes of violence came after Monday's stabbing attack in Southport, which killed 3 little girls. After thanking the police, many of whom suffered serious injuries, the Prime Minister announced a new police response group aimed at cracking down on civil disorder.
In the aftermath of this attack, the community of Southport had to suffer twice. A gang of thugs got on trains and buses, went to a community that is not their own, a community grieving the most horrific tragedy, and then proceeded to throw bricks at police officers who just 24 hours earlier had been having to deal with an attack on children in their community.
Well, the 17-year-old boy accused of murdering those 3 girls in Southport has been named today as Axel Rudakubana. 3 children, 7-year-old Elsie Stancombe, Alice Aguirre, who was 9, and 6-year-old Baby King, were killed during the attack at a holiday club. He appeared in court this morning and was named after a judge lifted reporting restrictions. He's now been remanded in youth detention custody. Now, in other news today, the BBC says it was told by police not to share details of Hugh Edwards' arrest for offences related to images of child abuse. It comes after it was revealed that the former news presenter was arrested in November but continued to be employed until April. In a statement, the BBC said that at the time, no charges had been brought against Mr Edwards, and it was also aware of a significant risk to his health. He pleaded guilty yesterday to charges relating to receiving indecent images of children during an online chat. In the United States, Donald Trump has caused some consternation after questioning the racial heritage of Kamala Harris. Speaking to a panel of black journalists, the former president claimed Ms Harris had changed from identifying as Indian American to being black. His suggestion that the vice president was using her race for political advantage drew some gasps of surprise from the audience in Chicago.
I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you?
Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She is always identified as a black woman.
I respect
historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't.
Well, responding to that conversation, Kamala Harris herself, who's the daughter of a Jamaican father and an Indian mother, gave this reaction.
Donald Trump spoke at the annual meeting of the National Association of Black Journalists. And it was the same old show. The divisiveness and the disrespect.
Well, in news here at home, the Bank of England has cut its base interest rate to 5%, marking the first reduction since March 2020. The rate had been held at 5.25% since August last year, which was the highest level since 2008. It comes as new data suggests the cost of living crisis is easing thanks to inflation cooling off. GPs in England have voted to limit the number of appointments available in their first collective action since 1964. NHS England says it could cause significant disruption across the whole health service. The British Medical Association says it's taking action over what it describes as a lack of funding for GPs. It comes despite the Health Secretary warning that while previous governments failed to recruit enough doctors, reducing services would only punish patients. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back in an hour. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much for that, Polly. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got my panel, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the journalist and commentator, Judita De Silva. Good evening to both of you. You're very welcome tonight. Also, each and every one of you, wherever you're watching or listening, you're, of course, very, very welcome this evening. I had this really well-planned programme for you all tonight. Stories, you know, coming out of my ears for you all. But of course, our Prime Minister just addressed the nation in response to some of the events that have been unfolding on the streets of Britain. So I've got to say, I've decided I do want to focus on that. I want to know your thoughts on what Sir Keir Starmer's had to say this afternoon. You can get in touch with me all the usual ways. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. You can go to the website, gbnews.com/yoursay, and speak to me and each other. Or, of course, you can tweet or X me. X me, that sounds really odd when I say that, but you know what I mean, Twitter or whatever it is that you call it these days. Let's start, though, by crossing live to our reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, good evening to you. Can you just bring us up to speed with some of the goings-on of the day today, please?
Good evening, Michelle. Well, earlier today, Axel Rudakabana attended two courts here at Liverpool. First, the youth court in the magistrates, where the charges were laid before him. 3 charges of murder, 10 of attempted murder, and another for possession of a bladed article in public. The clerk said it was a curved kitchen knife. He was then moved up to the Crown Court for further hearings, but in both courts he was silent. When asked to confirm his name, he did not do so. And when the judge, Mr. Justice Menery, asked his barrister if he could confirm his name, he also was unable to do it on his behalf. He sat in the dock with a grey tracksuit covering his face. Throughout both hearings, he barely moved, occasionally raising his eye above the hem of his tracksuit to gaze around the courtroom before quickly dipping back under his jumper. Now, the anonymity order was raised alongside those charges being laid down, which meant that 17-year-old Axel could be reported on publicly as the suspect and the man charged with those 3 different counts. Now, in explaining why he had lifted the anonymity order, Mr. Justice Menery said that he had to deal with competing legal perspectives. The youth justice team and the prosecution said that they wanted to keep his identity anonymous for both the defendant's welfare and the welfare of his family. But Mr. Justice Menery said, in response to protestations from the press in the court, that actually there was a more significant competing public interest here in this case. So serious are the alleged offences. And in particular, he said he wanted to dispel misinformation online. He said that there had been idiotic rioting sparked by nonsense spread on the internet, and he said that being able to dispel this misinformation would, in his perspective, reduce the risk of further rioting and protests. Now, it's understood that the police, in informing the prosecution, did not agree with that perspective, but the judge's word was final. Axel Rudakabana will next see court on the 25th of October for a plea hearing here at Liverpool Crown Court. Until then, he's been remanded into custody, in youth custody, in a secure unit.
Charlie Peters, interesting stuff. Thank you very much for that. I just want to make clear to everybody at home, because I know that many of you at home will be getting in touch with me or having conversations on your own sofas and saying, you know, why isn't this being raised? Why isn't that being raised? I just want to make it clear that my personal priority, the priority of many of you at home as well, is making sure that the person that Charlie Peters has just been referring to there stands trial. The worst thing that could happen for the parents of those children and the adults as well that have been affected by this is that somehow there is a contempt of court issue and this thing doesn't end up proceeding in the way that it actually should. That would be my worst nightmare. I really don't want anything like that to happen. Notwithstanding that, what Charlie's just been saying there, Kelvin, particularly about this decision to name this individual, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm glad he's been named, to be absolutely honest. Anonymity hasn't done this case any good up to now, and I think those that know where his family live know where his family live, and so there's no question of identifying the parents any more than they will be identified anyway in the area. But are we going to deal with actually what Starmer said?
We most certainly are. Don't you worry about that.
OK, fine. That's what I'd like to get into.
That will be taking up the bulk of this programme.
Speech, by the way, that.
Yeah, and just I've got some clips and stuff of that to play for you, and I'll come back to that in a second. Don't worry about that. Juditha, your thoughts on this whole the points that Charlie was just making there about this person being named and misinformation going around and so on and so forth?
It's a unique act have been taken because when you think about the whole concept of when someone is under the age of 18, keeping them anonymous, the idea is behind the 1933 Children and Young People's Act, which the thinking is, if someone is young, you make mistakes. And hopefully with wisdom and age that comes later, you can turn on a new slate and do better. That way, if you keep the identity private, they get that clean slate and that opportunity for rehabilitation. But that's around having a shorter sentence. So the judge is now in a case where there's misinformation, there's public unrest. He's going to be 18 next week. If you legally can name him next week, just name him now. So with those kinds of stimuli, it's understandable he could make this decision, but it is unprecedented because you set a dangerous precedent for the future that if people get angry enough, you throw an underage person to the wolves and also the family. Because think of someone like Sue Klebold, who's the mother of one of the killers in Columbine. Yeah. She's spoken extensively about what life is like where I didn't know. I couldn't identify it. Sometimes you have a child who just goes left.
OK.
She's been in danger since it happened.
Why don't we look at the other aspect of this? Yeah. Quite interesting. I am massively in favour of these younger people involved in these kinds of crimes. Not this particular one, but there are knife murders going on in our country every single day almost, right? I'm in favour of those killers being named. I do not believe that what was appropriate in 1933, when we got killers walking around at 14 and 13, literally with knives that long, killing people, that they're allowed, if we keep all quiet about this, nobody gets identified. By the time they get to 28 or 30, once they come out of doing 14 or 15 years, nobody will know. I want to know. I want to know if they live next door to me. I do not believe... look, I believe in salvation, obviously, but I do not believe that these people should be allowed to remain anonymous when they've carried out astonishing crimes.
But then you always have to ask yourself this, is, like they say, walk a mile in another person's shoes. If it's your son and you think they've gone down a wrong path for one act, don't you want to actually give them a chance that they might do better? Because if, for instance, like, look at how impassioned you are talking about, I want to know who it is. Yeah. I know what I'm like. The minute I know you've done something wrong, I'm judging you for the rest of your life. But if there is a chance you are better and you do better, having that put behind you gives you a chance to be a better person. But if you carry the shadow of one crime, you might never rehabilitate.
I think it's better PR for yourself that you've got a name and now you are, saying, working for charity or you're doing something, you're doing good work.
You don't
I
feel
think I think people will feel better. I do not want to be sitting alongside somebody, whether it's the presenter of GBNews or not.
Prejudgment stacks the deck against you. Prejudgment stacks the deck against you.
Well, I'm sure that's right. And actually, if they've murdered somebody with a 12-inch knife, you know, literally for a drug deal that's gone wrong or something, I think you're going to have this question mark against you, and you should have.
The anonymity question, one of the worst things that's ever happened in society, and it'll be at the forefront of many people's minds when it comes to anonymity and children and all the rest of it, will be the James Bulger murders. Do you remember those? And there was lots of conversations about whether or not those killers should have been named and all the rest of it. Of course, they were obviously named. They then went on to get new identities. One of them, he's had multiple new identities, actually. He seems to have been in and out of prison like a yo-yo. And then, I mean, when I think about that kind of case, the James Bulger murders, I think you can't redeem yourself. How can you talk about redemption and stuff? If you're the kind of person, aged 10, that steals a 2-year-old from their mummy and then goes on to do things to them that I don't even want to describe at tea time, they are so upsetting and traumatic. If you've got that in your psyche, age 10, I believe, personally, that you're beyond rehabilitation.
No, I do agree with you that, like I said, when you, like with what Sue Klebold has said, there are some people that are just evil. No matter what you do, they're just evil.
Well, do you want to know who they are?
No, but I'm saying that the theory, when this whole conversation about naming him came up, why it existed in the first place, there's an understanding behind it that there are some that are have the possibility of redemption. I completely agree with you. Some are beyond it and should be buried underneath the jail. But there has to be that window of opportunity that upon assessing the case, as the judge did in this case, he said, yes, he can be named. And I agree with that. But there should always be that due process. So you have a catchment area where that person who can be rehabilitated has the option of anonymity.
But if we all agree then that there are some people, and I'm thinking about the James Bulger killers in this instance, I don't believe that you can be, you are to me, if you can do that to a little boy aged 2, there's something, your wiring is not right, and there's no amount of textbooks you can read or meditation you can do or courses that you can attend that will get that out of your system. So do you then think that if we all agree you're beyond redemption, you're just an evil person, do you then think that that evil person should be given a brand new identity?
I said back then that they shouldn't have been, because there are certain cases, the Jamie Bulger case, things that other cases that have happened where I think it's a great advert for a discussion on the death penalty, because there's certain things you do that are so inhumane. Being given the luxury of existing alongside other people is taken away from you. So I do believe that, for me, that should exist for very elite cases like Jamie Bulger, like this case, and like others, where you've gone beyond the realm of humanity.
Yeah, obviously, I'm not going to get into this particular case, but I really completely agree with what you're saying, like these James Bulger killers. But no one would ever have a conversation.
Did you know what the funny thing about that? Everybody agrees here. Right, I've always been in favour of the death penalty.
But no one would have a conversation. Right. Keir Starmer would never put it to a referendum in this country.
He will know. You know why? Well, you know why? Because the answer will be that the death penalty will come in. Right? People, and this is why Brexit was a surprise to people, and lots of things turned out to be a surprise to people, because actually what people are forced to say in the office, and what they're forced to say, by the way, often in television stations, right, it turns out to be the opposite of actually what they're thinking.
I've never been forced to present a view that's different to my own at all, and I absolutely think, at the very least, it should go to referendum.
But that's because you work for GB News.
Very
right?
true.
Right, if you work for Sky, you'd be on there for about 0.001 second if you had any views. And by the way, somebody like me gets turfed off immediately. Somebody would mention my name and I get slung out.
I know you want to hear what people say about you in here. You won't believe it. Look, let's show you this clip of Sir Keir Starmer addressing the nation, 4 o'clock, a couple of hours ago? Listen.
I can announce today that following this meeting, we will establish a national capability across police forces to tackle violent disorder. These thugs are mobile. They move from community to community, and we must have a policing response that can do the same.
Your reactions to that speech are coming in thick and fast. So let's look at this after the break. Did you see Keir Starmer's speech? What do you make to it? See you in 2.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, to enrich us on the best cheeses and wine to buy, I'm delighted to be joined by the CEO of Inflorescence, Jacinta Madison Wilson. Jacinta, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you so much for having me.
Also, thank you so much for bringing what is
what a Sunday you're having.
of wonderful... What do we have before us?
So, we've got 3 gorgeous wines to try today. We've got an English sparkling, we've got a beautiful rosé and a dessert wine, and, of course, cheese.
Wonderful.
And paired them all beautifully.
Now, English sparkling wine has had a bit of a renaissance.
Oh, it's incredible, isn't it?
To use a French word to describe English sparkling wine. It's having a bit of a moment in the sun.
Absolutely. I just think it's so exciting that this is right on our doorstep, essentially, an hour out of London, and we're around beautiful vineyards.
The chalk sort of sediment is exactly the same as the Champagne region of France.
Yeah, our soils are really similar. We use the same grape varieties a lot of the time. We make it in exactly the same way as Champagne. Our climate is like Champagne was 40 to 50 years ago. So we're really kind of drinking it blind. You almost wouldn't know that you're not drinking champagne. But it's right here on our doorstep. We can stay local now.
Absolutely marvellous. Well, we've got... what is the best order to start?
OK, well, we're going to start with sparkling, because all things in life should start with sparkling. I got married a month ago, and this was actually the... Thank you so much. This was the wine I chose to have as our first wine that we served the guests. This is from a winery called Bluebell, which is in Sussex, and I've chosen to pair this with a lovely... kind of the English version of Camembert, which is called Tunworth. It's a very classic pairing of champagne and brie. So we're kind of going to do the English version of that now.
Classic.
Absolutely. Are you ready to get stuck in?
I am so...
OK.
Hang on. Is it cheese first or wine first?
I'd have a little sip of the wine first.
Sip of the wine,
have a little bite of the cheese, and then some more wine. Get it all mixed up in there.
It's like a cheese sandwich.
Exactly.
OK, here
cheers.
we go. Cheers.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. The former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, alongside me as is the journalist and commentator, Judita De Silva. Right, let's just look then, remind ourselves, Keir Starmer at 4 o'clock this afternoon, talking to us. Listen.
I can announce today that following this meeting, we will establish a national capability across police forces to tackle violent disorder. These thugs are mobile. They move from community to community. And we must have a policing response that can do the same.
Michael, one of my viewers, says, goodness me, Michelle, we just feel so angry in this household tonight. Lorraine says, Michelle, I watched this speech and I feel like Keir Starmer has just made things a whole lot worse. David says, I can't even believe it. The Prime Minister has basically tried to infer it somehow. The fault of far-right thugs that children have been murdered. I've got to tell you, I really am seeing a whole lot of anger. I can't even dress it up in any other way to the reaction, the speech that Keir Starmer has given. Keep your thoughts coming in. I'll keep including you in the conversation. But for now, Kelvin.
Right. Well, you're a centre-left Prime Minister. This is a free shot. There are two different issues here. One is the thuggery at Southport, which was 101% wrong. The idea that 50 police officers had to be treated in hospital is a disgrace, and I am astonished that any political party, no matter how far right or far left you are, would want to get involved in that kind of brawl against innocent police officers. That's a disgrace. But the other point that Starmer was making was one of prejudice, claiming that the accused here could be prejudiced by some of the online discussions. That is absolute cobblers, right? He knows it's cobblers. He's an experienced, pretty average lawyer, and he knows that there is no way in this particular case, because of the particular actions and the arrest, that there is any way that anything could be said about
but he will be talking about contempt of court, which is a very serious issue.
It's a serious issue. There is no way that this trial upcoming trial is going to break down on the basis of anything that is being said online. Online is not evidence, and anybody that has ever covered any court and covered any murder or anything knows that there is a complete difference between what is said outside and the line-by-line prosecution assessment of the case inside. So he's doing this for political reasons, but what he also gets completely wrong is the misunderstanding that people are enormously concerned is that if the person living next door to them may be, for instance, the reason that Hartlepool riots is because of a case of 4 years ago where an innocent 70-year-old man is walking along with his dog at 6 o'clock in the morning, a mad guy comes out and stabs him to death. That person turned out to be an Islamic extremist from Morocco, right? I imagine that if that 70-year-old man had known that man was in there, then he would not have gone past that house on that particular time. People are very fearful. They're fearful about the numbers of people coming into our country who we don't really know their background. These are people who throw their phones and their passports into the water on the way. What kind of people are they? And that is what concerns me. Now, the trouble is, him as a KC, or a QC, as he was then, Starmer does not get this. He lives in a high-security environment in a big house.
I have to challenge that, because if you... my mum's a lawyer. My family is infested with lawyers, quite frankly. Everyone around the world is watching this case, and a lot of people are having conversations like, I do not want to be the defence lawyer, but right now, Keir Starmer, the CPS and the police are in a very, very precarious position. When I watched those two women give their statement this morning, you could see the pressure on them.
Which two women?
Because the representative from the CPS and the police, when they named him, and you could see that they were tinged with pressure. That is because of this. When he's talking about a prejudiced trial, any defence lawyer who comes in, you can just look, what you do is assess the possibility of getting an innocent verdict based on the entire world knows this man, this boy is guilty. Any jury you get will find him guilty unanimously, so you then look at your alternative options. As a defence lawyer, your job is to zealously represent your client. You're going to look for mistrial. You're going to look for insanity plea. What they were doing with that boy is saying, at any point, when were you taken in? Did they read your rights? Did you have a representative with you? When you were called, did they give you something to eat? Because the minute you know, he's talking about
that wasn't the point he was making, was it? Let's be honest. He was actually making the point that everything that's online...
Hang on, don't talk over each other.
He was talking about a prejudice trial, and what a defence lawyer will do is find a loophole for a mistrial or for the trial to be thrown out because you know he's guilty. And the fact is, if you can find even the slightest loophole to show procedural error, you've got an opportunity. If they drop the ball on anything, you've got an opportunity. Another thing they can do is, when you look at the riots, when you look at the violence, what they will say is, we are in a country where people hate this boy so much, they will set their towns on fire. If they attack his family now, they will say because they cannot get to him, they're going to try to kill his parents. There is no way I can get a jury that is objective enough to give this man a fair trial. There he has opportunity for a mistrial.
He wasn't making
what he has to do
that point.
Is nothing unifies people.
He wasn't making that point.
No, nothing unifies people like having harm to children. This whole country, in fact, the whole world is on the same side about this towards that boy.
Right, but people want to know. They want to know, are we safe?
I'm just saying categorically that our conduct out here...
I'm more interested in ordinary people being safe.
...has to help the police
and I don't think you are.
And help the CPS get this trial done and done right by behaviour.
I'm here to help.
If you care about getting the families justice, you've got to enable them to do the job well.
No, they'll get their justice all right, but in the meantime, other people... people feel concerned about what world they are living in the UK right now.
And that's justified.
And it's a bigger story than the terrible outrage
And that's justified, but in the immediacy, all that matters is that everyone work together to enable an environment where the maximum justice is served for those families.
I agree with that.
So, I mean, you're saying that there's... Because one of the things that I have issue with about Sir Keir Starmer's speech... I've got a few issues with it, actually, and we'll go through them. So, basically, what he was saying was he was condemning the violence that was displayed to police officers, property, religious worship places, so on and so forth. He's quite right to condemn that. He shouldn't be doing those things. It is wrong. He was then also, I would argue, basically suggesting that anyone quite frankly, that goes out, that has concerns, that goes onto the street, is angry, is essentially far right. And he was talking very tough about clamping down. He's going to set up this new, like, kind of national policing unit. He's going to leverage things like facial recognition. I'll come back to those points in a minute, well, in a few minutes, actually, as we progress through the programme. But for now, the concern I've got is he didn't address at all, in any way, shape or form, why people are out on these streets. Kelvin mentions, Judita, that people are frightened. They're furious and they're frightened.
Yeah.
What do you think to that?
I think completely justified. The sentiment of fear is completely justified. Like, I call it almost trauma porn, because I avoid social media for as long as I can, because the assault of tragedies on social media will make you afraid to leave your house. So the sentiment of fear is tangible, it's palpable. But when you look at what's happening now, the first thing that comes into my head is, even though he's now a joke, Rudolph Giuliani in the 90s. What is happening now in Britain is not as bad as what New York was in 1990, but what approach did he have was a broken windows approach, where you are tough on everything, and that's how he cleaned up New York. They're trying to do something akin to that, to say that no matter what you do, we will come down on you hard, and then you eliminate the motivation to escalate.
Right, so I am a tough on law and order kind of girl. Anyone that watches my show, they'll hear me loads of times saying, you know, be tougher, be tougher, be tougher. Many people will have an issue with the fact that we have seen riots and violent disorder in this country. So I can think, for example, Hare Hills, Leeds. Where was the address to the nation? Nowhere. I can tell you that for free. We've seen other violent reactions. We've seen mob rule in society. We've seen collections of people descending on police stations. I'm thinking about places like Rochdale, dictating what will and won't happen in various different cases. Where was the clampdown, the tough on law and order? Nowhere. The second that white working-class Britons have the audacity to take to the streets about something that they're passionate about, boom, out comes the, we're really tough on you, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. People are furious. They feel that there is a two-tier approach.
I don't think in this particular case is that, like the point I made earlier about nothing unifies people like harm being done to children. Like you said, it's unprecedented what has happened. Everyone is unanimous in how they feel. So I think the pressure on him was to come out and say something, because remember what he kept saying in his speech was that the service to justice for the families. There's a pressure on him because they also feel that they need to see you reminding everyone about what the motivation behind this is. And everything, like he said, there will be time for questions, but all efforts are pointed in the direction of making sure this trial goes the right way and maximum justice is served. So that's why I feel that address had to be done.
OK, I must say that the other thing that he failed to mention, and God knows why he failed to mention it, was that the reason that a name got put out there and a religion got put out there, right, basically, as I read today in the Times and elsewhere, is that, in fact, it came from Russian black-handing, right? There were people anti-propaganda, right? So why doesn't he mention the people that were responsible for it? Oh, all right, look, I have no time for those riots. I have no time for the people involved in it. It's absolutely disgraceful. But actually what he's done is he's made a political point out of what is actually a social point. Our people are worried, right? And
worried about what?
They're worried about people coming to our nation, actually, who may have dark thoughts, and we don't know, and suddenly something happens. Now, in this case, hopefully, it has nothing to do with it, right? I really, really hope that, because I hesitate to think. But I remember Hartlepool, right? Right. It took 4 years from 2020 to the May of 2024 before the people of Hartlepool discovered that this poor old boy who had been walking his dog for years along that road had died because the guy was an illegal Islamic terrorist who come to our nation. Are there many other out there? And then when you get something like the Russians put out some stuff through the online world, which turned out to be completely untrue, right? Is it any wonder that people suddenly start rising up? I don't like those people who attack those police officers. I think it's an absolute disgrace. But for ordinary people to be sitting there worried in their homes tonight, yeah, I get that.
I think it's a conflation of issues. Is there a migration problem? Yes. Is there a spike in crime? Yes. But not all crimes are committed by migrants. There's a problem with crime, period.
No,
so
that isn't my point.
Yeah, but
that's
I'm saying
not my point.
No, but what's happening is that there's a narrative being cultivated that why would this mean why would the Russian misinformation catch hold? Because there is a sentiment being cultivated that associates migrants with crime. There is crime, period. Any criminal should be treated with the full brunt of the law. So what I'm thinking is that when you, again, like the judge made the right decision to put out the name, because wherever there is a vacuum, anything can go into it, and your enemies will exploit it, whether from China to Russia to wherever, they will exploit it. So Russia did what Russia is going to do. So to then say that it's the fault of this person or Keir Starmer, that's disingenuous.
But you can understand why you get this conflation of Muslim associated with violence, because we've had a lot of Muslim terrorism in our country. I mean,
but
you know, Manchester, that is a reasonable... Every time, anywhere in the world, in Germany, you suddenly hear of a stabbing, immediately you think to yourself, oh, my God, it's an Islamic action, isn't there? And that will be true in France. And the reason that it becomes true is because so many of these crimes have been carried out by Islamic terrorists.
That is granted. Well, let's say we move...
Is that reasonable?
Those points are granted. Those people committed those crimes 100%. But I say this, in a parallel dimension, if every single immigrant or person of immigrant descent was excised from British society, do you think crime would end?
No, I don't. I totally get that.
And that just strikes the point I made before.
Right
crime
now,
is crime, whoever does it.
But no, hang on. No, because I want to just challenge that point. You're saying crime is crime, whoever does it
should face the brunt of the law.
I know that there will be people... Yeah, of course, everyone should face the brunt of the law. But I know that there will be people at home watching this, and when you're saying, oh, crime is crime, doesn't matter who does it, many people will say, well, actually, it does matter who's done it, quite frankly, because if you've got a criminal that's a British citizen and, you know, he or she is a wrong un, you know, it's awful. And, of course, if you expel, you just said if you expel migrants, would your crime stop? Of course not. And the very point is we have so many wrong-uns among our own society, British citizens, that the very last thing that we need to be doing as a society is importing more. And, actually, many people will be watching this and saying that they have a concern. You saw at one of the protests, Stop the Boats. People are immediately starting to say, oh, look at that far-right person linking this to my... No, what people are concerned about, and I know this because I speak to you every single day of my life, I listen to what you're saying. People will say you are importing people essentially from war zones with a very different mindset and value set into this country, and the priority of the government seems to be how do we take care of that individual. It is not, or very rarely does it feel to people like the priority of the government is how do we keep British society safe. That seems to play second fiddle to how do we welcome these people in and give them all the things to make their lives comfortable. Let's address this in a bit more detail in 2.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Warm and sunny for many of us into tomorrow. Some further heavy downpours, though, across eastern England at first. And through this evening, we could still see some heavy downpours. Into Friday, though, we will see a weather front arrive from the northwest. That's going to introduce much fresher air. But before then, still a fairly muggy night to come. And as I said, it's a risk of thunderstorms first thing this evening across eastern areas of England. But those should die down as the night goes on. So a dry night for many of us, but still feeling quite humid and muggy, as I mentioned. Temperatures quite widely in the mid to high teens across England and Wales. A little bit fresher further north, but still fairly mild for the time of year. Now, into Friday morning, there'll be some wet weather arriving into the far north and west, spreading into parts of western Scotland, bringing cloudier skies, some outbreaks of quite heavy rain. The winds will also start to pick up. It's a southwesterly breeze on Friday morning. Eastern areas of Scotland, northeastern England, though, still a bright start. Temperatures already 16 or 17 degrees by 8 o'clock. Another warm and sunny start to the day across Wales, many areas of England, but it's in the southeast where we've got that risk of some further heavy downpours through Friday morning. They won't be quite as widespread as we're expecting through the rest of today, however. And then once they clear away, for many of us, it will be a dry and sunny afternoon. However, wet weather is spreading into parts of Northern Ireland, much of Scotland. We could see some quite heavy outbreaks of rain through Friday afternoon. Turning a bit fresher behind this band of rain, but ahead of it, still quite a humid feel. Temperatures widely in the mid to high 20s. Now, on Saturday, that band of rain sinks into southeastern areas, so there's potential for some quite heavy rain across southern areas of England and the southeast, particularly as we head into Saturday afternoon. Further north, dry across northern England, some showers though across the north and west. Into Sunday, it looks a bit drier across eastern areas of England, but there will be further wet weather spreading in from the south and west and temperatures staying around average.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. The latest on that police investigation in Greater Manchester. Greater Manchester Police just confirming that both sides of the carriageway of the M60 back open after the restrictions were lifted from the Stockport Pyramid exit and Bridlington. Long delays remain, however. And the M5 is closed northbound through the West Midlands from West Bromwich Junction 1 up to the M6, also for a police investigation causing long queues back onto the southbound M6 from the M54. Further south on the M5, it's down to a single lane heading south through Worcestershire, just north of the M50. Past the scene of an accident, everyone's been squeezed into the outside lane. On the Kent stretch of the M25, the anti-clockwise exit is partly blocked at Swanley at the M20 following a breakdown causing queues back to Orpington, and still really slow out of Southampton on the M271 just south of the M27 following a crash causing queues back to Redbridge at the A33. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry, till 7. Kelvin Mackenzie and Judita De Silva remain alongside me. Look, off the back of Sir Keir Starmer addressing the nation at 4 o'clock this afternoon, I'm just picking up on some of the key strands that he had to say there. And one of the things that's coming through thick and fast, I'm asking you how you think what he said, what do you think to it? The theme that keeps coming through is he doesn't seem to understand why people are taking to the streets. All well and good talking tough, but if you're not resolving the issue that people have, or the issues plural, because there'll be different ones, you're never going to fix anything. So what we're talking about before the break is this notion that people, it's become this kind of, this fear now. Who are these people that are coming into this country? What are their intentions? And people are afraid, Judita.
I think there's every justification to be afraid based on where society has gotten to now. But I would be keen to see numbers about what percentage of migrants commit crimes and the kinds of crimes, because when you look at that proportion, the perception that's being driven, where if we can just clear out all the immigrants and the criminals there, we can focus on our criminals. The percentages is probably not enough for you to say, throw the baby out with the bathwater.
But I would argue that we don't know, because that data is not being collected properly. And I would probably wonder, why is that data not being collected in the way that
because it's something that, based on where we are now, it needs to be collected. Because then that's a very weighted argument, because if the numbers are high, then yes, they should all be.
You've got to look at the types of crimes as well. So we've seen riots.
You saw it in Denmark, by the way. They did it in Denmark, didn't they? They put down the migrant, whichever community it was, and the number of crimes, and everybody went mad. And the one person who's not going to carry out that piece of research, which I agree with you, it'd be great research, by the way, is of course Starmer. Starmer is going to turn out to be an absolute nightmare in relation to stopping the boats coming in. Our country wants to stop the boats. Now, there is a conflation going on. Yeah. I do get that, but it is part of why the English Defence League and these other organisations have grown to prominence, because they look to ordinary politicians, whether they're Conservative, Lib Dem or Labour, and say, look, guys, this has now been going on, for 6-7 years now. Massive numbers coming to our country, towns cities the size of Durham growing up literally every year, in a world where we can't even, where doctors won't even see you, if you've got the flu or something. So we want that resolved, and then something like this comes along, then false news comes out, fake news does come out. I happen to know something about that, lad, right? Fake news comes out, and suddenly this turns out to be a melting pot of trouble. And I do not believe for one single second that Starmer's this is typical lawyer coming out. I tell you what, let's say something to the nation, try and put everybody at their peace. The police forces do talk to each other.
I do agree with what you said and what Michelle have said, that Keir Starmer needs to sit with his team and address what's making people fearful, because the environment of fear is just fertile ground for things to go in a very negative direction. When you're panicked, you react in ways that you never react when you are feeling rational or feeling safe. And that's what they have to deal with. Like you said, what is making everyone so fearful? And the fact that when you actually look at where fear is pointed, whether it's the EDL or Russia just spreading misinformation, they know that's how it works.
The EDL don't even exist, by the way. It's not really existed for ages, and they're sitting there and talking about prescribing it as some kind of terrorist organisation. I think it's laughable.
That is something that, if you have something like what we've seen with these riots, and if people are chanting who the F is Allah. That is a very clear signal about the sentiment of the people there.
Yeah.
You have to address it.
Well, hold on, let me address
what has
this.
cultivated people getting to a point where they feel they need to say that? That's where I agree. Starmer has to address the environment of fear that's happening now, because things like town halls should be happening regularly.
He's not the guy to do it. He has nothing to do it. He is a left-of-centre lawyer, right, who's had a gilded life, right? He doesn't live in these communities, which he's seen change a lot. He doesn't understand how ordinary people feel about this issue. He just thinks it can all be solved with a nice piece of political little speech-making like this, which will warm the hearts of people who live in Hampstead.
I want to just pick up as well this point, because people are afraid, and there's two different types of fear. One is kind of it's almost like a fantasy. It's not based on reality. It's not based on any facts. It's just based on whatever. It's nonsensical fear. Another type of fear is a genuine fear based on facts, based on things that have actually happened, and therefore I would call them legitimate fears. You're just mentioning there that people will make, very unkind, disrespectful, quite disgusting chants about Islam. I don't agree with that. I think that's really quite disrespectful. I mean, people know very well my best friend's a Muslim. There's loads of very peaceful Muslims in this country. You're disrespecting their religion, and it's not great. However, you do have to be realistic. You mentioned the Hartlepool terror attack.
Shocking.
As you quite rightly point out, he was saying he was doing his attacks for the people of Gaza. Now, every single week, it feels like we have marches in this country to support Gaza. So then you've got this fear there that people are thinking, well, hang on a second, this fellow, he's just murdered people in Hartlepool. He's done it, he says, because of Gaza. Yesterday, a guy was convicted. It was his second. He had 2 previous terror-related convictions, and he was jailed for 10 years. This is just yesterday, everybody, for posting extremist Islamist content. You know, if you look, a month ago, we came so close to a terror attack in this country, in Leeds, actually, a hospital in Leeds. And there was a guy, he'd got a bomb. He'd sent a text to try and evacuate the hospital. It's a long story and I'm conscious of time, but he was intending to evacuate the hospital, set off the bomb, and then stab the people that remained. I mean, that was a month ago that guy was sentenced. You guessed it. He was following an Islamist ideology. So I would suggest and put to you, as my viewers tell me on a daily basis, that fear that people have is based on tangible events that are happening in their society. Tell me your thoughts. Let's continue the conversation in 2.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
It was also announced that the Prince of Wales is set to star in a new 2-part documentary on ITV covering his mission to try and eradicate homelessness.
Well, let's talk about this and much, much more with Angela Levin, royal biographer, who joins us in the studio. I'm glad to hear that this documentary's been made, Angela, because I worried that he made this big announcement about homelessness, and I thought, goodness me, here is somebody who could maybe do something about this. And then it's all seemed to have gone quiet.
He's been very busy with it, actually. He's gone all over the country to see different areas and how they have been, and to try and change people's attitude to homelessness, that they're people who need help and want to get back into a normal life, and he's there to do it. I mean, we mustn't forget that I think it was 2009, he slept out in the street to see for himself what it was like, and he also helped people who are selling the magazine.
Big Issue, no?
Yes, The Big Issue. And he's worked all day long with the same man twice now. So I think he was actually just covering the basic about what it was like for him and how he can now help other people. He and Catherine are putting £3 million straight away into that, and it's going to
Where
be...
does that money come from?
Their own foundation, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they're not taking it from our tax or anybody else's, you know, and there will be a lot more, and he's been getting the money to do this, and I think it's he wants to do this so badly because of his mother. You know, she took them to see people who were homeless.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry, Kelvin McKenzie and Judita De Silva alongside me. Phil says, I think the PM's statement was pretty well measured under the circumstances. Ollie says he feels that Starmer is trying to bring a new start to the UK and weren't following the steps of the Tories, which were all about bringing hate among everybody in the country. Stacey, though, says, I cannot even bring myself to say the Prime Minister's name. He is an absolute disgrace to our nation. Sally, I get so angry that the Westminster bubble again comes out with the usual far-right mantra if anyone goes out on a march. Picking up on this conversation then about fear and where this is coming from and how valid that fear is, we've just been going through some of the examples of some of the situations that have occurred very, very recently within society. There was a riot in Manchester last night as well, let's not forget. Ariana Grande, that concert there, those children killed. This is an issue very close to those communities' hearts. One of my viewers had just got in touch and said political correctness is to blame for lots of what's going wrong in society. Everyone will remember that at the inquest, the security guard said he spotted a man that looked out of place. He instinctively knew that something was wrong, and he did not dare radio it through because, in his words, the guy had brown skin and he might have been a Muslim, and the security guard didn't dare be called racist. Now, one of the themes that's coming through thick and fast tonight, Judita, is that Keir Starmer again is calling people that are concerned about, yet again, children being murdered, far right.
See, again, I do, on that point, all the branding of who's where, what political affiliation, who has, you have no right to say that about anyone until they declare it themselves. What we saw was Islamophobia, it was extremism. So as far as whether you're far right, far left, I don't pay that any heed.
I'm trying to explain to you. But, so if I just explain to you some of these recent things that have been done by people that claim to follow Islam, do you think it is then extremist to then be fearful of the religion that they say that they are acting within?
It is in no way extremist to feel fear, but what I'm saying is it's about having a holistic perspective, which is very hard to do when you've been, put it like this, take for me personally, I've been attacked, I've been punched, I've been pushed, I've been spat at, I've been insulted. But the fact is I have enough of a perspective to isolate an incident to an individual and not let it drive my fear so much that I judge everyone.
Yeah, well, of course, that happens to me. You know, exactly the same, right, for different reasons. So you just have to get on with your life. I find it... I do think that the issue surrounding the killings was of...
Which killings?
The killings in Southport plugged into a kind of febrile atmosphere which existed, and immediately you hear about stabbings and immediately you hear about children. Honestly, 1 + 1 does equal 2, normally. I'm not saying in this case, I've no idea in this case, right? But therefore that triggers off, you know, the within you that, oh my God, I can't believe it, you know. Oh yes, I know why that happened, because if you think of Ariana Grande and you think of Taylor Swift, and those kinds of discussions take place.
Matt says, Michelle, these words like thugs and far right and so on and so forth, they were only ever really wheeled out when it's working class Britain, white British people saying it. They weren't getting all of this criticism and all of the name calling when they were burning down hair hills. The people that go onto the streets and terrify Jewish people and call for genocide, they don't get this level of clampdown and crackdown. How dare he, says Doe, call people far right or thugs? He has no idea at all the level of anger in this country. Liam says he's approaching the situation, this is Keir Starmer, with caution to every single group. He's trying to do his job well. There you go. I mean, I can tell you there's a lot of anger still out there tonight. I desperately want our society to progress forward in a happier way. I just wonder whether or not Keir Starmer missed the point. From many of you responding to me tonight, it certainly feels so. Judita, Kelvin, thank you for your company. Thank you to each and every one of you. This conversation, I'm sure, will continue again. But that's all from me. Up next, Farage. Night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Warm and sunny for many of us into tomorrow. Some further heavy downpours, though, across eastern England at first. And through this evening, we could still see some heavy downpours. Into Friday, though, we will see a weather front arrive from the northwest. That's going to introduce much fresher air. But before then, still a fairly muggy night to come. And as I said, it's a risk of thunderstorms first thing this evening across eastern areas of England. But those should die down as the night goes on. So a dry night for many of us.